Hopefully I won't be able to see the people who are talking. Yeah,
For co-counsel at the table. Be way up high like a judge.
I think the table's down.
Judges.
Yeah.
Maybe Regina herself or the judge.
I don't know.
Yeah, good afternoon. I know we have
Candy, if I had thought about it.
other guests who will be arriving, but I'm Bill Kovacic. I'm the head of the Competition Law Center here and a member of the faculty at George Washington. And we're thrilled to have you here. Years ago, when we created the Competition Law Center with a generous CPRE award from the District Court for the District of Columbia, we told the court that what we wanted to do first and foremost was to recognize people who build institutions, to create the institutional foundations that are essential for good governance and good public policy making. And we especially wanted to recognize individuals who played a key role in doing that, not necessarily those who headed agencies, who of course get all the honor and glory from doing that, but people who came early and stayed late to make the process operate effectively. We called this our Institution Builder Series. Our first honoree last year is Don Clowder. Don wonderfully has joined us here. We started with a former DOJ official who'd done so much to build the customs and habits that made that a wonderfully well-respected institution around the world in the field of competition law. Had such a role to play in professional societies in building the competition policy system. And Chris Wright is our second honoree. And Chris, we're thrilled to have you here with Judy, with your family, and so many of your admirers, your neighbors, your friends, and your former colleagues. Part of what's astonishing is that I don't know that from my own memory and that of others that anyone had the simple longevity that you had, Chris. Into 5 decades of service at the FTC in one place. And longevity is not the same thing as high quality, but Chris had that too. The extraordinary fulfillment of roles across the history of your time there, from the early 70s, your start with Mary Gardner Jones as an advisor, the marvelous work you did for Mike Perchek in Mike's chairmanship, the many other roles, both in substantive policy positions, executive director, Bureau of Consumer Protection, and then the astonishing service you performed in the Office of General Counsel. There's not an area of the General Counsel's work that you didn't touch in such a positive way. The building of an ethics program, the building of a program that assisted new nominees in their approach to the commission and their entry into the commission in one area after another over a long period of time, through times of strife, through times of relative peace, relative happiness, through difficult moments. You were a consistent and powerful force for good throughout the agency. What you bring, of course, is enormous skill, but the experience, and when you mix skill with experience, you get intuition. Intuition that makes you uniquely able to provide good guidance to all who work in the building and do it with such a nice touch. I'm partly a prisoner of sports. I can't escape it. But I've had a number of instances in my former life when I thought I was going to be a journalist to talk to athletes and ask them what was the best thing about your experience with other athletes. And the thing they mentioned most of all was I had the opportunity to play with some of the greatest who ever lived. That is, I got to be next to them. I got to see what they could do day in and day out. And that was an enormous thrill. And when I think of Chris's work, I think when it comes to identifying a civil servant who contributed to the work of the agency, I think I got to see the greatest of all time. Simply got to see the best of the life. And I say that without hesitation as an academic loudmouth. Of course, we see all kinds of things without contradiction, but I don't think I'd be contradicted here because that's precisely the person who Chris was. And we're going to celebrate that today with those who built wonderful structures, built the architecture of the system that's crucial for its operation. What we'll do today is we have several of our guests who are going to make short comments. I'll just invite you to come up here if you like. If you want to just sit where you are with a microphone, we can do that too. But to make some comments, we have a couple of contributors from our online gathering, and thank you so much for joining us today. It's really a tribute to us and to Chris to have you with us. A number of people have sent me written contributions, and I'll read a couple of them for you because they're so sweet, so wonderful, so much capture Chris's life and work. And then we'll ask Chris to say a few things before we break, and we'll have a reception right across the hallway, and you'll take a lot of great memories home along with those that you already have. So if I could start to kick this off, Lydia, could you please join me here?
Yes, I will.
Thank you. Thank you, Lydia.
Thanks so much, Bill. Chris, I am so thrilled to be here to honor you and your contributions to the Federal Trade Commission. I have to say, I was so moved when I got the invitation to this event. I know that all of us here believe so strongly in the rule of law. And I love that GW's Competition Law Center, and particularly Bill, are recognizing that the law is an empty promise without the institutions that interpret and enforce those laws. And of course, institutions, and in this case, we're talking about a federal agency, it's just an empty building without the people in that agency who dedicate themselves to achieving the agency's mission. Chris, as Bill so beautifully laid out, he is certainly one of the people who helped build the modern FTC. He saw the agency through so many of its iterations. For almost 50 years, wow, 50, that's a big number.
Half century, yes.
Chris had a hand in just about everything. He was the FTC's executive director during a time, and I think Bill alluded to this, it was a tumultuous time. In response to what Congress then deemed regulatory overreach, the Congress shut down the agency for about 24 hours as their way of kind of making a point. And I have to say, at that time, a 24-hour shutdown of a federal agency was considered to be shocking and unprecedented. And do you remember when we first met?
Was it in that room when I was talking about the shutdown?
I was sent over, I was in the general counsel's office at the Office of Personnel Management at the time, and I was sent over with the shutdown notice. Great way to meet. I never thought I would end up, at the FTC. But Chris built, again, as Bill mentioned, the FTC's ethics program and trained multiple generations of lawyers at the commission on how to represent the interests of American consumers without even the appearance of impropriety. And I have to say, in addition, those training programs were fun. So we all loved going to them. And when Chairman Janet Steiger was looking for a steady hand to guide the Bureau of Consumer Protection in her last years at the agency, she turned to Chris and appointed him as her bureau director. I sought Chris's guidance on many occasions, but we worked most closely together when he was BCP bureau director. I saw up close and on a daily basis his personal commitment to the agency. He cared and cares about the agency, its mission, and all of the people who work there. Chris, I again, congratulations on this recognition, and it is so well deserved.
Thank you, Lydia. I think many of us remember the vote on the continuing resolution that took place where the Congress said the funding of the federal government will continue pro rata, except for the Federal Trade Commission. And we, I guess we were singled out as special and in an unwanted way. That was quite a moment. Mary, if I can ask you to join me. Mary Esquinaga, I should have mentioned, of course, Lydia, for so many years, the director of the Bureau of Consumer Protection, and Mary, a member of the Federal Trade Commission and member of the General Counsel's Office. Thrilled to have you here today. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you. Shall I use this?
Yeah, you can use that one, or you can, this one will pick up.
This one will pick up.
recording. Yeah.
I'll stand because I always tell people the one rule about public speaking is that you need to be heard because you have a captive audience and what are they going to do but listen to you? So I've known Chris for a long time. He actually started a little before me at the FTC, not much, but a little. And I'm delighted to be here today to honor him. Never has an award been so well deserved. He made the FTC the institution and the family that it was, that made it an important thing. We all believed in our mission and we all got along and we cherished the agency and all of our time there. And it's very much due to you, Chris. So I'd like to talk about, start with 3 traits, characteristics, things about Chris. First of all, he had the most immense knowledge of the FTC, of the people, of the law, of how to get things done, of how to solve problems, who did what for whom, and how to make it all work together. Before we had Google search, I was one of many who found that Chris was my Google search. Another characteristic of Chris is that he was always very protective. And this goes to the creation of a family. He was protective of the agency, he was protective of our mission, and he was protected of each and every person who worked in that agency, from the people who worked in the garage through all of the offices. And he did this wherever he went and whatever he was doing. He was always protecting people and he made things work. He smoothed things out and made things work. And the third characteristic I would mention is that he was always welcoming and inclusive. And I've never been shy about saying what I think about the law or even shy about talking to a captive audience. But outside of that, until well into my career, I was uncommonly shy. And so whenever I would go to a gathering, when I was at the FTC and for many years afterwards, I would always look up, because that's where you could find him. And I would head toward Chris, because he was always there with a smile and a welcome, as if he really was happy to see me. But it wasn't just me, it was everyone. Everyone, I mean everyone. And we all benefited from that. So I'd like to just give you, just relate a few incidents that come to my mind that kind of show you Chris in action. I had worked for the FTC for a few years after law school and then moved out to San Francisco and worked in the San Francisco regional office, where along with 2 other baby lawyers, we've tried the last great long rule of reason merger case. And they don't use baby lawyers anymore. But that was a great learning experience. Anyway, my husband got an offer of a good job as an assistant to Bill Baxter in the antitrust division in DC, and we were in San Francisco. And so I applied to the Bureau of Competition and I got a job offer there. But we were still paying off student loans, and although we didn't have much to move, the moving costs looked enormous to us, and we were trying to figure out how to deal with them. And I talked to my boss, and a few days later, he came back and said, "How would you like to be the assistant to the executive director?" And I thought, well, that sounds interesting. Chris was the executive director. And then my boss said, "And he'll pay the moving expenses." And I didn't go there just for the moving expenses. But it certainly helped me make my decision. And that was an example. I mean, I wasn't the most qualified person to take that job. I hadn't interviewed, I hadn't applied. It was just Chris making things work for a junior lawyer. And I was always grateful for that. And also for the opportunity. My gosh, he's the easiest guy to work for. Another incident, back in the old days, and of course, I'm just all about the old days because I did leave the FTC after a little over 25 years. No half decade for me. In the old days, we had a tradition of something called the FTC Follies. They were a holiday party that we had every year, and we had entertainment offered by the staff. And one of the things that commissioners were asked to do, and I was a commissioner by then, was to prepare humorous videos. And so we would make our videos, the party would go on, there would be the entertainment. And as soon as the entertainment, you know, the more embarrassing it was for the commissioners, the more the audience liked it. And so they really liked me. And so anyway, after the entertainment, there would be a party and food and drink, and someone would say, "Well, where's Chris?" And Chris had something to do. He had something to take care of, but he'll be back. Well, what he was doing was he was collecting all the videos and destroying them. And the reason that he did it so quickly is that to keep Art Amolsch, who was the editor of FTC Watch at the time, used to file so many FOIA requests. And he loved things like this. And Chris had to run and destroy those videos before Art Amolsch filed a FOIA request. So he was not only protecting those of us who made the embarrassing videos, but he was protecting the tradition, which was a great tradition. And because if it had ever appeared in the press, some of the things that we did, you know, that would be the last time we made a video. Another thing that I thought showed the way Chris did things, he got a call one day. There was a gentleman who worked in the garage. The FTC headquarters has a small footprint, and Chris remembers this. And there's a garage downstairs, and it's small. And there's also not only a few cars, but deliveries and equipment and so on. And so if you parked your car there, you had to leave the keys with at the garage in case someone had to move your car to get their car out. Well, one day somebody forgot his or her keys, and someone else needed to get his or her car out. And so this gentleman who worked in the garage, and he had some intellectual challenges, but he was a good employee. He was friendly. He said hello to everybody when they went through, and his attendance record was great, and he always wanted to help. So he wanted to help. And so what he did is he got the forklift and he moved the car, the offending car, with the forklift. And now I don't actually know what Chris did in terms of having specific upfront information, but I know what he did because I know Chris. And so first of all, he laughed, he chuckled. And then he went immediately, talked to the supervisors, and figured out a way that they could implement procedures, necessary procedures, so that this would never happen again. And then he went immediately to the owner of the car that had been moved on top of the forklift, and told them about it. And I'm sure told them that any damage would be taken care of, and it was. And he's nodding because he knows that's what he did. And it could have been a bad incident, either for the employee or for the person who owned the car. It could have been a lot worse, but most people didn't even know how it was handled. I didn't know, but I knew. Mm-hmm. I knew because I know Chris. There's one other incident I want to tell about where Chris did what Chris does. And he's just always there for everybody and smoothing the way and taking care of people. there was a lawyer in the general counsel's office who was brilliant. And he was a direct report to me when I was assistant general counsel. And he took far more of my time and energy than anyone else, because although he was brilliant, he had a lot of issues. And I finally kind of learned how to deal with his issues, and I was fond of him, and he was a great asset. He spent his entire career at the commission, in the general counsel's office, and we were lucky to have him. He would never have fit, he wouldn't have fit in at a law firm, and he wouldn't have wanted to be there. He didn't have many friends. He did have friends. I became fond of him. I stayed in touch with him for quite a while after I left the agency. We used to send each other holiday cards at least, but over time I kind of lost track of him, as did a lot of people. And he was able to get married, and but unfortunately his wife died, and he retired. And Chris stayed in touch with him. Chris would call him from time to time. And one time, Chris called and didn't get an answer, and then he tried again and again and didn't get an answer. So he looked up the home address for this lawyer, and he went out to his house. And Chris was the last one who was with this person as he died, after he died. And I'll let Chris tell you that story. The best friend of the brilliant lawyer who died alone was Chris. That lawyer was not Chris's best friend, but Chris took care of him all the way to the end, and no one knew about it. And that's just a sign of how Chris made the FTC a family. And it was my, no, I'm gonna tear up. It was my privilege and my pleasure to work for and with you. Thank you.
You capture so well, Mary, the selflessness and graciousness of the man. Coming back to me immediately are so many memories of instances in which he did something that was out of the public eye, not even visible to those of us who were in the office, but enormously important to the person who is the recipient of the kindness. Doing something without any expectation of reward, glory, recognition, simply doing it because it was decent and the right thing to do again and again. Thanks for bringing that to mind, Mary, so much. Peter, can I ask you to join us, please? Peter Kinsler. Please, Peter, thank you. The podium is yours.
Thank you very much. As everyone here knows, in 1971, Chris came to the Federal Trade Commission from Nader's Herb to help shake up the little old lady on Pennsylvania Avenue. Not content with helping to transform the agency, he stayed nearly 50 years doing the hard work of making the FTC an effective advocate for competition and consumer interest. Chris was that rare breed of reformer who stayed to become an institutionalist. I do not hold him responsible for the events after his departure. I met Chris in 1974 when I left the Hill to work for the FTC's Office of Legislation. My major assignment was to prepare Chairman Lou Engman for the first congressional oversight hearings of the Federal Trade Commission. I think it was about 40 years. Having worked on the Hill, I knew how to frame the questions and answers for the chairman. What I didn't know was what the questions and answers were. I quickly found Chris, who already had encyclopedic knowledge of the agency. We became friends through shared public policy goals, senses of humor, a love of folk music, and of crafts. At the 1974 Smithsonian Folklife Festival, we met a man named W.G. Lovern from Thomastown, Mississippi. He had made these hand caned and hand carved rocking chairs. And there's a little sign dangling from them. It said $40. So I went to Mr. Lover and said, Mr. Lover, where can we get one of those chairs? He said, well, you can come to the auction on Saturday. Well, it being DC, this clearly wasn't going to auction for anything less than $200. That was not in our budget at the time. So I said, well, is there any other way to do that? And he said, well, you come on down to Thomastown, Mississippi, and I'll pack them up for you, take them back. That didn't seem like a particularly good option. So we negotiated the right to buy them from him if there was, so long as there were two, and he would cart them up and send them to us. He made two kinds, one with a round arm, one with a flat arm. Chris wanted the flat arm, I wanted the round arm. So they came in due course. With nearly 50 years later, I guess it is 49 years later, we still have the chairs. They have stood the test of time, as has our friendship, albeit both the chairs and us are a little worse off for the wear. At the FTC, I also discovered that despite his height, Chris was not a basketball player. It was more comfortable wearing, as I recall, Chris, and I may be wrong here, short pants and tights in a production of Gilbert and Sullivan's Mikado, a site that left an indelible mark of which I recovered only recently. 1975, 1 year later, I returned to the Hill with the House staff responsibility for reauthorizing the Federal Trade Commission. So naturally, I continued to rely on Chris. That seemingly simple project in 1975 wound up taking 5 years as the commission ran into strong headwinds during changing times as Congressman, in Congress, as Chairman Mike Perchuk was pursuing, to say the least, an aggressive consumer protection policies. I was far from the only one relying on Chris's sage advice, as he truly became the indispensable man to a succession of chairmen of different parties, including Republicans Lou Engman and Cal Collier, Democrat Perchuk, and Republican Jim Miller. I don't know anybody else who could have worked for that range of people. Chris gave each of them his best advice as he moved through almost all the key staff positions at the commission. But Chris's loyalty always remained to the FTC's mission. The statues in front of the FTC symbolize its role struggling to control big business to ensure fair competition and protect consumers. That is the role Chris played so well for so long. In a time when public service is denigrated daily by our own government, I commend the Competition Law Center at George Washington University for honoring the service of a person who spent his career making government work for people. Whatever the size and mandate of government institutions, it will always need brilliant and dedicated people to staff its operations. Chris was simply the best such person I ever knew. Thank you.
Peter, again, picks up so many features of Chris's life that impressed all of us, seeing it firsthand day in and day out. One is that there's never been a person before, there will not be a person since, who was such a master of knowledge about the agency. Nobody had a deeper awareness, and to such an extent, as you know, the real knowledge, the capability of the agency resides in this kind of memory, in institutional memory, which he passed along in an incomparably effective way. And the other that Peter mentioned is Chris's capacity to work effectively with a succession of leaders who were not the same people by any means. And I think there was something special about your innate sensibilities, Chris, your genuineness, your commitment to the institution that brought all of these people around to trust you deeply and not simply tolerate your presence, but to welcome it. And that is across a wide range of individuals. I don't think you can teach anyone how to do that But what was so impressive to all of us is how you became an indispensable source of advice to people across the spectrum. That's a special skill, incredibly special skill and talent, which Peter, you've drawn out so well here. Thank you. Can I ask Tom Stanton to come and join us, please? Tom, another longtime colleague of Chris's, in his own way, a true stalwart of the FTC, of its planning process, of so much of the work that built a great agency. Tom, thank you. Thank you.
First of all, it's marvelous to see a law school and the competition program of the law school honor an institution builder. There are so few people who understand the need for strong institutions in order to help us get things done. I think I am one of the people who has known Chris the longest in this room. Sam Simon is on the screen there. We both joined as newly minted lawyers, joined Ralph Nader's Public Interest Research Group. And Chris worked on the Federal Trade Commission. I worked on income tax reform, trying to reduce inefficient and expensive loopholes. You can tell Chris succeeded brilliantly, and especially since the most recent tax bill, you can see I didn't do nearly as well. I came to the Federal Trade Commission as deputy to Bob Reich, who headed the Office of Policy Planning. And at that time, Chris was the executive director. And one of the things that impressed me most as somebody who was trying to get stuff done was things worked. And that's so important that you didn't need to worry about fighting bureaucracy. One of our sons manages a laboratory at a university fighting childhood cancer, and he's constantly tearing his hair out about the administrative structure. We didn't have any of that, and I'd like to go through a few of those examples. Bob Reich was running off to the White House, so I was left to administer the office, and I interfaced with all of these different functions, contracting out. We had a project on new home construction defects and builders that would build shoddy houses that caused people tremendous financial loss. And I went to a friend at the Department of Housing and Urban Development, because we didn't have any money at the FTC, and arranged for them to do the lion's share of the funding. We did a little bit. The contracting, I guess it was Barry Kefauver, contracting went effortlessly. We didn't have to worry about it. It just really worked. Personnel. Another example, Bob was constantly getting grief from the personnel shop. And then he told me I was in charge of the administrative functions. So what happened, the head of personnel and I went across the street to a little diner and had a cup of coffee. And she said to me, you know, you folks, I know this is not in vogue anymore, but this is pre-woke. You folks are doing well hiring women. You're not hiring enough minorities. And so I said, okay, if that's the problem, let's do it. And after that, the personnel shop just supported what we were trying to do. The administrative side was constantly supporting us in the delivery of services side. Training. I had two of the most wonderful training experiences of my professional life. One, the agency sent me to the Harvard B School, to their program for senior managers in government. Another, I went for a week to Jack Rosenblum to a course on basically interpersonal relations. We ate vegetarian and we often sat on the floor. It had a certain aura about it. But in addition, we really learned interpersonal relations in a fundamental way, and it was really important. And I forget the woman's name who was in charge of the training function. She was fantastic. Regional offices. A lot of agencies lose control of their regional offices. A process was in place that we could relate to the regional offices, have evaluation sessions, work together rather than at loggerheads, again, to get something done. And finally, we had the commission, when I was there, was structured, we had a weak monarch, Mike Perchuk, who was sort of laid back in his own way, and very strong barons, the heads of the different bureaus who were constantly at loggerheads fighting for advantage. And so, and I think it was Bob Reich's idea, but I can't remember. Chris and I went back and forth on this. We hired an organizational development specialist. And he went around the agency teaching people, hey, let's get along, let's optimize what we can achieve rather than constantly being at loggerheads. So, Chris, you made the trains run and they ran beautifully, and we didn't need to worry about all of that other stuff while we were doing our jobs. Finally, I want to say Chris is not only a wonderful institutional developer and somebody who built the FTC into a strong institution. And here I'm echoing Mary Asquinaga. He's also a very kind person. One of the people that we were at the original Public Interest Research Group has a really serious and potentially terminal disability. I was talking with Chris one day, and Chris is visiting that friend every month. Not seen, nobody knew about it, but he was visiting that friend every month. So Chris, congratulations. You're the kind of person who makes an institution strong and also a great place to be at. So thank you.
Yeah, Tom brings out so well, especially in the decade of the 70s, how the agency was attempting to launch very ambitious substantive programs, but at the same time create internal structures to make them effective. The difficulty you have of trying to build the house and live in it at the same time, those processes were moving in parallel. Tom played a crucial role in the planning Office of Policy Planning, in creating the capability to do strategic planning, to look over the horizon. At the same time, Chris was creating the internal administrative infrastructure. It can't be overemphasized how important that was, Tom, in building a good HR process, building a good process within the Office of the Executive Director, creating management systems, project management that in many ways had been underdeveloped. It would have been nice if they'd been in place in, say, 1970 instead of built along the way, but someone had to build them. And that was just an indispensable contribution to the development of the agency over time. Without it, nothing good could have been done before, during, or since. We have a couple of contributions from our participants online. Steve Puckins is going to join us a little bit later, but Lee Peeler, Lee, if you could unmute yourself, please join us and give us your thoughts about Chris, Lee. And thank you for being online with us.
And Bill, can you hear me now?
Very well, thank you.
Great. So
They can hear you too. Go ahead.
First off, I want to reiterate the congratulations to the Law Center for this great program and for selecting Chris. There's really no one who deserves this recognition as an institutional builder more than Chris. And to Chris and his family, I just want to say how sorry I am that I can't be there in person. Chris has been a major figure in his life, and I have wonderful memories of him and Judy encouraging me throughout my career at the FTC. But I'm actually following one of the rules that Chris taught me, which is family's always first. And I need to pack off some grandchildren on the West Coast to school tomorrow morning. So that's my excuse for not being there. I was at the FTC for 34 years, starting in the early 1970s. And Chris was there, as everyone has noted, larger than life when I got there, and he was still there when I left. So to me, legal institutions like the FTC are the sum of their people and their principles. And it's impossible, in retrospect, to overstate the changes that occurred to both the people and the principles of the FTC from that time in the late 1960s when Chris joined until the present time. The FTC moved from the little old lady of Pennsylvania Avenue to the Tyrannosaurus Rex of federal regulatory agencies in the 1970s, but to its place now, which is a world-respected leader in consumer protection and competition policy. While he's known for his skill, as has been discussed today, guiding a multitude of new FTC commissioners through the confirmation process and the introduction of the FTC. To me, Chris's real impact was on the FTC staff. As the really iconic and former Commissioner Mary Gardner Jones said about Chris in her interview, he's the model of a career public servant. And so much more so, he's a skilled lawyer with that rare legal ability to be practical as well as accurate in his legal judgments. And to me, that's best demonstrated by the Chris White legal maximum, don't get caught between the boat and the dock. As well as Chris's ability to rescue those who often disregarded his advice. But the hundreds of FTC staff that Chris had the opportunity to work with, Chris provided a model of effective leadership. He showed us all how to be a leader who is equally at ease with the role of captain or crew, who shows up for his staff. And as many people have talked about today, he shows up both professionally, but also personally. And because of that, he gets things done and the agency gets things done. I know from personal experience that there are many of us at the FTC staff that were fortunate enough to work directly with Chris, and we were able to pass on those skills to our staff. And I also know from personal experience that the staff we pass those skills on is passing them on to other staff. So when you, as a former manager, have the thrill of hearing from one of the people that work from you, how much they appreciated your mentorship and guidance, I always think to myself, yeah, and I got that from Chris White. So with that, I'm going to stop. I do want to pose one question for the audience, though. One of my many memories of Chris was that on the long walks from satellite buildings to the main FTC to meet with commissioners and to meet with bureau directors, the other lesson that Chris taught was never pass up a discarded piece of office furniture that might be of use in some other capacity. And I know that Chris's family is there, so it would be interesting to know what happened to all of those pieces of office equipment. I remember distinctly a large broken plexiglass slider for office chairs that disappeared from the alley of the 601 Pennsylvania Avenue building into Chris's office. Chris, thank you so much for all that you've done for the agency, all you've done for me personally, and all you've done for the American consumers.
Yes.
That piece of plastic is in the basement under the sliding office chair.
A bit later, Steve Calkins is going to join us online. Steve is finishing up a class this afternoon, and he'll be joining as soon as he can. And if you'll help me watching for Chris, for Steve as he comes along, we'll be sure to bring him into the conversation. And Lee, again, all of you in a very touching way have brought out features of his life at the commission and features of his life as a friend to all of us that are so striking. And the extent to which you led by the example of your own life, where people got to watch you day in and day out, established a sense of expectations customs, habits that became embedded in the institution because people saw that day in and day out. And you were able to lead effectively, to be firm when you had to be, but you never ascended by climbing over the wounded bodies of others that you'd pulled down before you. A real demonstration that you can be extremely effective and a good human being at the same time, and a good teacher in doing that. And Lee, thank you for reminding us of that. I want to just read a couple of the notes for former colleagues of Chris who aren't with us here today, but wanted me to pass along their good wishes and join the celebration. The first comes from Bill Bear. Bill has served an illustrious career in a variety of roles in public service, one of which at the FTC, being the head of the Bureau of Competition. And as you'll see, fond memories of his work with Chris. As Bill says, calling Chris the model career employee vastly understates what he meant to the FTC for so many years. I saw that firsthand as a young, and I was that once, attorney in the Bureau of Consumer Protection, where Chris was Assistant Director for Credit Practices when I joined BCP in 1975. But some 18 months later, when FTC nominee and chair designate Mike Perchuk wisely asked Chris to head his transition team, and the two of them asked me to be the junior transition staffer, Chris and I were joined at the hip for a 4-year FTC roller coaster ride. Chris as chief of staff and me as an attorney advisor, and later as the assistant general counsel for congressional liaison. Chris's institutional knowledge, his commitment to the agency, his respect for our colleagues, and his drive to make the commission thrive in the Carter administration served Mike well. And when the FTC became the target of congressional scorn for doing what earlier Congresses had asked it to do, Chris was the steadying hand, keeping us all focused on doing our job and turning out the extraneous noise. Did Chris have a temper in those days? Occasionally. But only when he thought we were not doing our job right, or someone put self-interest above our shared mission. I was more than okay with that. His sense of humor kept us smiling, and his deep bass laugh often echoed through the halls. We needed that in the dark days as we faced threats to the commission's appropriations, indeed to its very existence. I recall nearing the end of one especially tough week when we agreed that the only appropriate course was to cross the street to Apex Liquor, buy 2 beers, take them outside in paper bags, sit on the curb and look across the street at our beloved agency and wonder whether the scenario was in our future. Thank you, Chris, for all you've done and for a friendship I treasure. Bill Bear. The second note is from Don Clover, who's online with us today, and again was our inaugural honoree in 2024. Don says, congratulations on your selection as an antitrust institution builder, an honor I have solely held for almost 1.5 years and will continue to cherish forever. I'm delighted to share this honor with you. I know we have met over the years, but my knowledge of your impressive work at the FTC comes principally from our mutual dear friend and mentor, Cass Hobbs. Cass is the standard by which we should be measured. And it is to Cass and John Shenefield that I owe my career as it developed. The ABA stuff was totally Cass. Cass guided me step by step, as he did you, not by telling us what to do, but by the simple eloquence of his example. Cass was, for you and me, the best publicity agent in the profession. He made us better in so many ways, and our reception of the institution builder's recognition is influenced directly by Cass. Congratulations, Chris, and cherish the day and all who joined in the celebration. From Don Clover. And the third is from James Mitz-Spears, former general counsel of the Federal Trade Commission. After 8 years in the Justice Department, I have to admit that my first few months at the FTC were a bit of a shock. Used to the linear decision-making processes that were familiar at Justice, I was ill-prepared to deal with the decidedly non-linear complexities of life at the FTC. What could Mitt be talking about? After stepping on more than a few rakes during my first weeks, I found myself trudging down the hall late one Friday afternoon seeking wisdom and insight from a very large man at the other end of the hall who had a beard and a penchant for wearing baseball caps that seemed to have a much better understanding of this multi-headed beast than I did. It was a walk that I was to repeat many times. Because there is no operational manual at the FTC, one must draw upon the experiences of others, find one's way through the labyrinth. It soon became obvious to me that few possess Chris White's perspective or expertise, and I quickly learned the wisdom of consulting with Chris whenever I encountered some new, unexpected, or thorny issue. Beyond that, Chris had an uncanny ability to read and take the pulse of this organic beast. While some of that was likely a product of his considerable experience, I think more of it was due to the fact that Chris had a keen understanding of the personalities involved in the process. Chris made it his business to develop warm working relationships with just about everybody in the building. I cannot think of a single person at the FTC during my tenure who didn't like or did not trust Chris White. And at the FTC, that's a pretty tall order. But the thing that perhaps separated Chris White most from so many of his contemporaries was the fact that he believed in and was completely and totally committed to the mission of the agency. I never saw Chris employ his considerable talents and skills to benefit himself or make his life at the commission more comfortable or influential. Instead, I always saw him working away to soothe bruised egos, reconcile conflicting views, and in the end, making sure that the commission made the best decisions possible. Chris White personifies everything that is good about federal service. He was my mentor, my confidant, and perhaps most importantly, my friend. I feel fortunate to have had the opportunity to serve with him. Thank you, Mitt. Giving Chris an opportunity to offer some of his own reflections, and perhaps when you're done, Chris, if you don't mind joining us now, what I'll do is ask Steve. So Steve pops up. He can follow you in the queue.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris.
Now, I wrote a few things down, but there were so many little tiny pieces of stories that are rich. I think I probably have to bite my tongue, and I will not spend my time telling stories. Let me begin with afterwards. Let me begin with a true statement. I would not be here if it were not for the George Washington University. In fact, I wouldn't be anywhere if it weren't for the George Washington University. My parents were undergraduates and met here. So my connection with this august institution goes back a long way. My father, you will not be surprised, was a football player, as I was. My mother was embedded in the student government at George Washington University. And I guess I should say, it's been decades, I believe, since the university had a football team. But back in the day, it was a thing. There are many, many people who I must thank. And you're in this room, and some of you are online, and of course there are many, many others. First, my friend and colleague Bill Kovacic, whom I met, I believe, the first time in 2001, when he was coming in to be the general counsel of the FTC. And it was clear to me from the very beginning that he was an institution builder, that he cared about all of what the other speakers have said about what it takes to get the job done. And I just, it was a pleasure to work with you. And it's been a continuous and growing relationship that we've had, and I really appreciate that. And of course, those of you in this room are people I must thank. My family is here. My wife Judy, by the way, partly the reason why my family is all here is that Judy and I celebrated our 50th wedding anniversary over the weekend. Our daughters, our 3 grandchildren, my son-in-law, you know, it's just, it's a wonderful thing to have connections like that. My nephew, his wife, is here, and again, a wonderful opportunity. They put up with, I don't want to tell you how much grief from me. And there was times when I got home late and left early. There were times when I was bound up in my work and maybe not completely kind to the people I was working with, and they helped me through it. You know, there's just no way that any of this could have happened, but without the support of family. And as Lee says, that's got to come first, and it always has. Thanks are due to all the FTC colleagues, many here, many others that couldn't be with us for a variety of reasons. They made it possible to devote myself to the commission's missions of protecting the public. Consumer protection competition. Many of you have said wonderful things about me this evening, and some of them I think are probably even true. We don't want to get too carried away with that. But none of that could have happened without the conditions necessary for the kind of development that's happened to the commission since 1970. First of all, it's a small agency. And while process and procedure are essential, what is also essential is knowing who is the person who can get the job done for you. The way I learned that was, I'm walking down the hall in the first month of my tenure at the FTC, and someone I don't know comes up to me and says, "Hi, I'm Bill Dickerson. You don't know me, and you don't know that the FTC has a basketball team." And I tried to say, "Listen, I'm a football lineman. Our job is to get as close to the ground as possible. I don't jump in the air very much." But he said, "No, you should do this." And it was, of course, a great experience. And we actually one day beat a team from the Army that had uniforms. Oh my God. But more importantly, I met people from all around the agency that did things that were important to getting things done that I would not otherwise have known. And so that was probably the most, that little meeting was as important as almost anything. I said things are essential for this kind of development, a small agency, small enough that that things can be done on a human scale. Not that you don't have to have bureaucracy, because you do, but you have to make bureaucracy work for the people instead of the other way around. And that's what I always focused on. And the other thing that was essential to me was being surrounded by colleagues who I thought of as friends, who were in their areas more knowledgeable and smarter than I was. And so you've got to take advantage of everything that's available to you, you know, and I had the reputation as the person to ask about obscure matters of FTC procedure and authority. And that reputation should have gone to my colleague, Bruce Friedman, the late Bruce Friedman, because he's the one I always had to go to when something was particularly obscure. I was also referred to as the FTC's historian at one point. And really, again, that's a label that should go to Bill, to your co-author, Mark Weinerman. And there are so many that I could cite where I got credit for doing things that could only have been done with the support of other FTC people. The truth is, I never planned for this career, and I did have this long career, and I did lots of different jobs, and it was fantastic, great fun. But I never planned for that. Shortly before I retired, the Bureau of Consumer Protection summer program coordinator came to me and said, "You've had this long career. we want you to talk to the summer interns. And I said, well, I can certainly talk about my career. I have 1,000,001 stories, love to tell them. But the truth is, I don't have any career advice to provide because, and this is literally true, this is like 2016. The last time I asked anyone for a job was in the spring of 1970 when I submitted my resume to Ralph Nader, because the rest of it happened. You know, it happened to me, and there are wonderful stories associated with that. But oftentimes, people at the FTC, and this is a very distinct feature, people at the FTC would come to me and ask me to do something, and I don't think I ever said no. And so that led to the kind of experience that you could only hope for. It was the best and the most fun-filled career for a guy like me that could be imagined. I'm hopeful that the current vicissitudes do not dim that thirst for pursuing the public interest, for protecting the public, as one can have an experience like that, but maybe only at an agency like the FTC. So thank you to all of you and all these wonderful things that you've said. I appreciate it.
Thank you. We're going to bring Chris back up to the podium in a minute for one further celebration, but we've been joined by Steve Calkins. Steve, also a former general counsel at the FTC, and Steve very generously has taken some time out of his academic schedule to join us. And Steve, if you can please offer your remarks. Thank you.
Well, I'm appalled that I'm late. But I was teaching consumer law and talking about the Federal Trade Commission and what's not to like about that. And so I rushed here as soon as I could. And I thank you for the opportunity. And I know it's not good to come in when you've all already said all the things that I'm going to say. And, well, you know, when we don't have the opportunity to let Chris White respond to me. So I now have license, but I'm going to go ahead. I thought a little bit about what I would say, and rather than do anything original, I pulled out literally a memo that I wrote at the end of my time as general counsel about what we had done and what had made me pleased and what, you know, that sort of thing. And there it was that one of the things that I was very pleased about, I wrote to myself way back when, was that Chris White had been serving as the director of BCP, and he came back to the office of general counsel, and I noted that it had been a pleasure to have him come back on board to the OGC and to resume the important work that he was doing in that office in the special role that he had. And that stuck with me then, and it sticks with me now. No, the truth of the matter is, I'm one of the old guys who loves the FTC as the bipartisan collegial body with commitment to its mission and respect for the career staff. And the truth of the matter is that no one epitomized that better than Chris White. This is one, I mean, you know, I remember his giving advice to all the incoming commissioners, and some of them were wonderful and some of them were not. But whether they were liberal or Democrats or Republicans, conservatives, whatever, he looked after people, and he liked people and people liked him. Indeed, I think he did a good work and was, let's just say that I can remember a time when he described somebody who was such an unbelievable jerk. This was after I was gone, that maybe he didn't really view them with affection. But in general, he viewed people with affection and people viewed him with affection. So now if the FTC that we knew and loved is being killed off, and I fear that it is, it's so appropriate that you all got together and we get to think about someone who epitomized that FTC, and that being Chris White. A lot of people do projection and view in others what they in fact are doing themselves. Some might say that happens a little bit in the White House, but I'm not going to talk about politics. But Chris was somebody who did some projecting, I think. I found not an old email from a couple of years back when he had organized that magnificent party for Bill Golden out at Spider Kelly's, and a bunch of you were there, and what a great event. And it's so typical of Chris to having organized it. Well, a year or two after that, he circulated an email. And in it, he wrote about Bill, and I quote, "Bill's contributions made working at the FTC better on so many levels. Excellent legal analysis, understandable explanations of so many arcane provisions, but most of all, seeing the need for laughing at our pretensions." And Chris could just as easily, indeed better, have written that about himself than about Bill Golden. And then the email continued, where Chris wrote that among his favorite memories of Bill were, quote, "of the times he sent out parody staff memos using my name. They were devilishly funny send-ups of the bureaucratic foibles of the FTC." End quote. And what can you say about somebody whose favorite memories include the time that someone took his name and did a parody, making fun and making the butt of the joke be him? What you can say about that is that, that really might have been a better time and a better agency, but certainly an agency made much better because of Chris White. So I'm thrilled to be able to join you even at the very end here. And I want to thank Chris for all that he's done. And I just wish that I could be there in person to see Chris and all the rest of you.
Thank you, Steve. Steve, I'm thrilled that you could do this. Thanks so much. And again, that very, very warm human touch that went out to the whole agency when you were around. I put it this way. Did you ever see Chris walk in a room and you did not feel better because of it?
That's right.
A couple times when there was a difficult question to deal with, but always another commissioner's office, be sure. But that is so characteristic of his life at the agency with all of us. Before I ask Chris to come back and join me again, I want to thank several people here. I'm so grateful to my colleagues at the law school here. We have John Nuchterlein with us, another former general counsel at the FTC. John's one of our distinguished scholars who's joined us this year, part of an ensemble that we do hope to build into a still better competition policy system. Delighted to have John here with us. Second, we have a number of our students here, several of whom have been instrumental in helping put the event together. I urge them to come because I wanted them to see life in public service at its best and to hear others reflect on that. I think that they'll walk out of this with a sense of inspiration that'll carry them forward, that will be very helpful to them. And thanks so much to my student colleagues here, to Rafa, to Teo, to Alejandro, to Anwar, who's been helping us guide everyone into the building, and indeed to Kier Hannon, whom you corresponded with, who is the incomparable faculty secretary and real administrative backbone of our school. Until today, I thought that Red Auerbach was the most distinguished graduate of the undergraduate program here, but I was wrong. It's your parents. Red Auerbach, the famous Boston Celtics basketball coach and general manager. Red, during his post-basketball career, did a number of events here at GW. He'd come back. And I think in this very room, gave a seminar once, having a conversation about what it was like to be associated with the greatest string of success that a professional sports franchise has ever had. Red Auerbach was at the center of that and quite instrumental in making that happen. I remember sitting in the room then watching him thinking, I'm looking at the greatest basketball coach who ever lived and the greatest GM. 11 championships in 13 years. That will never happen. Quite astonishing. And I'm so thrilled today to have exactly the same sensation that I'm looking at the greatest who ever lived. The very best. Thank you first. Thank you. We have for you an absolutely invaluable and priceless collection of swag. that only a great university can make available. But thank you again. I hope you think of us with a glow in your heart in the future about this day and all the work. And I'm so thrilled that all of our online guests, thank you for being here. All of you being with us in person at the moment. And how often can you think of something that you look forward to and with great pleasure, and it meets all of your expectations because of the person we've honored. Thank you again. For our in-person attendees, we have a reception right across the hallway where you can get some adult drinks and have a few snacks. Thank you again for coming. Thanks, online. Thank you, Dean. Thank you.
That's Chris. Yeah, Sam. No.
It's just a shout out again. Yeah. All right. Thanks for the call. That's a little more around. Thanks for coming.
I heard you.
Certainly don't for
I compare in debt. Fine. But I was. You? That's what you.
Very well.